All right, the next session is going to be electricity costs and best practices.
Okay, well, I want to catch up a little bit here, so I'll get started while our group is starting to take their seats. But my name is Fred Silver, a Vice President of CalSTART, and I'm the bus team leader. And this session is going to be focused on electricity costs and the best practices. We're going to kind of talk about the charging technology. We're going to have and what you need to do in terms of being smart and using the charging technology. We know that the utilities will talk later on about their rates, so we're not going to so much talk about rates. We're going to talk about how do we deal with their rates and how do we ultimately get a fuel cost that's competitive to conventionally fueled buses. So that's our goal here. And then there are some basic issues associated with the elements of the electricity costs that we need to overcome that I just point out. Most of you are familiar with these. Will point out the one thing that Leslie brought up was optimizing, as she brought up a very good point. Sometimes you do need smart, so you don't just always top off your vehicle. I mean, there are vehicles that you might only use for 70 miles. Maybe you need to charge them twice, every other day. But so there are these charging strategies that says don't fully charge everything all the time. So that's one element you want to be smart about. But the other smart things that you want to be smart about are, of course, getting the best energy rates, the consumption rates. And, consumption is measured in terms of kilowatt hour rates. Many utilities, 15, 20 cents a kilowatt hour is what you're used to seeing for that. And sometimes it's often seasonally adjusted so that maybe in the summertime, the rates may be a little higher, in the wintertime a little bit less. And there's also time of use rates here in California. I know the air conditioners all go on late in the day, or the renewables go down late in the day because the sun is starting to go down. And so what do you think happens? The rates go up late in the day. So there are time of use rates, and after 4 to 9, you might see some rates that increase as well. So you've got to be aware of those. But the real killer for the business case, and we saw that with the chart that Anrel showed on Foothill Transit, was the red line, which showed how much the peak demand charge impacted the electric costs. So that's a real factor, and it's we've had a lot of struggles. I know the industry has, talking to utilities, what are you charging me these fees? I think we've gotten past that, understand there's a regular cost to them for those demands, so they're not just penalizing you because they're having fun doing that. There's a real cost associated with providing you with the ability to pull instantaneous power. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, if it's a power that you may consume at a given period of time, not over a long period of time like the energy is consumed, for a 15-minute period. If you consume it for more than a 15-minute period, you're going to get hit with this higher rate that affects your entire bill. So what are the strategies in dealing with that? I think Foothill probably has some ideas on how you can mitigate those issues because they've been affected by it. So we have this great panel of experts here today. Folks that have worked with opportunity charging, folks that have worked with off-board chargers, folks that are putting microgrids in, that are trying this from all different standpoints. And then we have some good consultants here that are all helping AVTA do this incredible overlay of smartness to their system, which we're anxious to hear about because we need that smartness, and maybe you want to understand what they're doing so you can do that as well. So the way I'd like to do this is we don't want PowerPoint by death at this meeting. We want a little bit of dialogue, especially since we don't have a lot of time. I'd like to have each of the panelists introduce themselves to each other. And then at the end, we'll have some questions. But if anybody in the audience, a fleet that has an experience, RTD or somebody else wants to tell us their experience and how they're addressing these electricity costs, we all love to hear from you. So I will give you a chance to do that. If you really have a burning need to do that, raise your hand or raise it halfway. I'll keep my eyes open for you, and I'll make sure that you have an opportunity to provide your input. So why don't we first start? We're going to start first with Roland Cordero at Foothill. I know that we talked a lot about their work there, so Roland will start first and let us know how he's approaching the electricity costs.
Oh, there you go. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us, CARB. Give us this opportunity to share our experience with our electric bus project. We started back in 2010, as Kevin mentioned earlier, with 3 buses, and then in 2014 we added 12 more fast charge battery electric buses. We were able to electrify fleet line 291 with a fleet of 16 buses. Line 291 is a short route. It's a circulator route between the city of Pomona and Laverne. It's 16.1 miles long. And the buses that we deployed on this service are fast charge Proterra 35-foot buses with a range of 35 miles. So when we started the project, we realized that our utility rates were really out of bounds. We did get a waiver from demand charges from the PUC for the first 3 years. And then after that, Southern California Edison came out with a time of use EV4 rate, which basically lowered the charges for delivery charges and generation charges per kilowatt. But then they came back and instituted the demand charges. When you look at your utility bill, for us, the biggest portion of our cost for fueling an electric bus, almost 50%, comes from the demand charges. Demand charges are based on the highest 15-minute energy usage to charge your buses. And the rate for that is $15.89. So for our experience, we originally had some charges where we were going above 500 kilowatts. So in order to reduce that demand charge, Proterra did some software upgrades in our charging system to slow the rate of the charge. What happened then, and it took us longer to charge the bus, but then again, we're not going over the 500 kilowatts, which would shift us over to a commercial rate, which would be twice as much as what we're paying on a time of use EV4 rate. So one of the tactics was to reduce the energy to charge the bus. Then again, we had to add a couple of minutes to our dwell time at the bus stops because it's taken longer to push that energy to bring the state of charge on the bus. The fast charge buses usually stop at the transit center every hour from their circulator route. From their route, usually they're about 60 to 70%, sometimes at 50%, and you can charge the buses back up to almost 100% during that 7-minute dwell time while passengers board in the light. What's interesting is a lot of people are talking about charging your buses during off-peak. And looking at our utility bills, I noticed that the off-peak cost is only about 2 cents off of your on-peak cost. Usually on winter months, it's about 6 cents for on-peak for your generation charges. But off-peak is about 4 cents. So that's only 2 cents of a variance right there. There's also a delivery charge. That's the cost for delivering electricity to your site, and that's about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. But in looking at our summer rates, the on-peak is 19 cents per kilowatt hour. So instead of looking at your on-peak, off-peak demand charging scheduling, you might want to look at how you charge your buses during the summer months, because that's where you get the biggest impact in your utility bill. As Leslie Udy showed on her chart earlier, our utility bills have gone up drastically versus our winter bills. So you got to look at that. I mean, first off, too, as a transit agency, your main goal and mission is to provide transit, public service, transportation, on-time performance, and all that kind of good stuff. So in considering your charging schedules and how you charge your buses, you got to look at being able to deliver your service first and work that way around on how you schedule charging your buses. So another way for us to reduce our utility bills at line 291, we deploy more buses. so that you can spread your demand charge over a larger number of fleet and over a larger number of miles on that route. Instead of, when we originally had 3 buses, that demand charge was still costing us half of our utility bill. But with adding 12 more buses to that route, we were able to reduce that, that cost on a per mile basis.
So it sounds like 3 suggestions there. Number 1 is if you're working with a high-power charger, trying to work with the manufacturer to get it down a bit. To the degree you can, depress that power level. Don't go to the full 500 kilowatts. And then even further, make sure you mitigate that demand charge by having as many vehicles as you can operate on the same opportunity charger, I guess.
On the same route.
Right, because you only get hit one time. So even if you hit 12 buses getting the demand, you only get the penalty once. So you can get it for 12, 20, as many buses as you can stuff through that cycle. And the third thing, which we didn't quite understand how to do this yet, but is to get really smart in the summer when you get these huge time of use rates, because those are killers. But we'll try and figure that out as we get smarter here on deploying these buses. So why don't we go on to Gary, who is our expert here from VTA.
Yeah, so VTA is the transit authority in the San Jose, California area. So at this point in time, we're not too worried about heat or cold, by the way. So we'll, as we do more testing, we'll see how that goes. But so far, we haven't seen much of an impact. VTA runs about 34 million passenger trips a day. We have got about 480 buses, 98 trains. We used to have 100. Anyway, yeah, a little humor in there. All right. VTA is also the congestion management agency, so we're not just a transit agency, but we also deal with the county's congestion and deal with building roads and building transit areas and building a whole bunch of other stuff. So we kind of talked a lot about what the problems are. We're also running right now 5 Proterra buses. We're pretty much doing depot charging only with the 440 kilowatt hour batteries. And right now the routes we're running on them are about 14 hours. We're doing about 180 miles. The advantages of, I guess, of having new buses. And we're burning about 2 kilowatts per hour. So it kind of gives you an idea about where we are. It's a nice flat route, by the way. The yards are kind of interesting. The one yard that we've electrified and that we're running the electric buses has 960 kilowatts per hour solar. All 3 of our yards, we got about 1.2 megawatts of solar energy generation. And so basically from about 9 a.m. till about 4 or so, we're actually putting power onto the grid because we'd like to use that for something else. And so we've engaged NREL, who is part of our VGI project, Vehicle to Grid Integration Project, who did some great analysis of both our routes and our yard and our solar generation, and kind of looked at how we could basically better manipulate our blocks and routes and which routes actually do 180 miles or less, and then how we could maybe help reformulate our routes into better blocks to be able to better leverage our electric buses. So that helped right there. And then the second thing we did is they looked at the opportunity of running, like we run a lot of morning buses, and then they come back in the yard during the middle of the day, and then go back in the afternoon. And so by reworking on those, having them, do the early pullout, run through the middle of the morning, come back by around 10 o'clock, charge from like 10 till 2, go back out in the afternoon, and then we could run those for another 7 or 8 or 10 more hours if we really wanted to, and then before we brought those back in. So there's a lot of things that we've learned on how we could manipulate basically the routes and blocks and when we charge. And remember, all those buses that we're charging in the middle of the day really are going to come off of our solar generation. Now, PG&E is planning on changing the solar structure, the new rate plan, and the new rate plan is what they're proposing to the CPUC is that from roughly around 9 a.m. till around 2 will be an ultra low rate, and then from 4 to like 10 will be the ultra high rate, and then everything else is the normal rate. Now, what the numbers are in there, they haven't really defined yet, but that's kind of what we're looking at. And so we're looking at how can we better, planning for that ahead, how can we basically develop something that can take an advantage of that? So with working with Prospect Silicon Valley, we kind of brainstormed up this idea of this automated software. Being that I'm the chief technology officer, we solve everything with software, right? So we thought we could do that again. And so the California Energy Commission thought that was a great idea. And so they gave us about $1.9 million, by the way, to go off and do a number of different projects. One was to look at automating, what we do in the yard. So we're basically integrating our, the maintenance system, all the IT systems that are in the yard, as well as all the IT systems that when the bus actually is out in the field. So we're integrating our CAD-AVL clever devices to the new software, the trapeze to the new software, SAP. All the different applications are all being integrated together. So now we'll be able to make decisions in real time. So the whole group is made up of ChargePoint, which is actually doing the software development, and they're also who provided the chargers. The Proterra, which is our, integrating that to our clever devices. NREL is part of our team, PG&E, clever devices, Trapeze, Energy Solutions. We've even had the Antelope Valley Transportation, we've been kind of partnering with them, CalStart, Nova, and a number of others. So it's a really big team that we've developed here to go off and build this. So the key in the yard software part of this is, which is also where the key to this is being built by ChargePoint. The key is what we're doing is we're building a charge plan per vehicle. So as the software understands exactly as the bus is coming back, knows how much energy is on the bus, left on the bus after its daily route, and then it can go and define when is the best time with all the other buses to actually start charging that bus. And then physically, we actually then modify the yards to make basically the electric buses go through the cleaning and bus wash. They all get routed through there first, so they can get onto the chargers as soon as possible. The energy management software also, basically talks to the grid and is looking at the yard. So it can basically, in real time, we'll be able to, if the yard starts drawing a lot more power, then it'll actually be able to tone down the chargers and modify the charge plans accordingly. And then hopefully we'll be able to we'll have dashboards so that the yard managers will be able to, see what's going on in the field. So if a bus is supposed to be on a charger per its charge plan and it's not, then they'll be able to send, a maintenance person out to find the bus and get it plugged in so it's plugged in and ready for this next day pullout. The whole idea is to run most of it by alarms. So if there's something going on, everything will be triggered off of an alarm. Real-time decisions, and hopefully we'll be able to, we'll also have the ability, thanks to NREL, to be able to do some simulations. So as we build new routes and blocks, we'll be able to help kind of simulate what impact that's going to have. So the overall goals of what we're trying to accomplish here and what we're trying to build is basically that every bus will be ready for pullout when it's required, and there could be multiple different, as we have today, different pullouts, but we can keep that in mind. And only put as much energy on the bus as required for the next day run, so we don't have to charge up every bus to its maximum, because as we know, that last 5 or 10%, you actually have to put more energy in than you get out, so the efficiency kind of drops off there. And then lastly, we've also took that to one more step as we worked with Clever Devices, and they're modifying their CAD-AVL software that tracks the bus actually in the field. So now basically the dispatcher will have an idea of what all of the energy consumption is on all the electric buses. And then if the electric bus is now consuming more power than what it was supposed to for that block, it will alarm the dispatcher and they'll be able to make decisions accordingly. So that's pretty much what we're trying to do to manage a large fleet of electric vehicles.
Wow, there's a lot going on there. So it sounds like you've got this wonderful energy storage system.
We haven't done the storage yet, but yes.
Excuse me, I didn't mean energy, I meant the solar system.
Yes.
Energy grabbing system. And that's great, because we have one of those too at our facility. We're completely net zero on the energy use, but we find, like you find, that all of our energy costs comes between 4 and 6 a.m. We have a fleet of 6 vehicles. They're not buses, but probably the same thing for you. And we've optimized the fleet. We told nobody they could charge between 4 and 6. So we've eliminated that problem. So you have to figure out these operational plans. You went out and did a corridor analysis, which was really exciting, to kind of figure out how to design your corridor and your operations to better utilize the technology you have at the time. Maybe it'll get better over time as batteries get better, but you got what you got at this point. Okay, and you have this wonderful, what you called yard management, but it's really kind of yard/operations management software that on a dashboard that helps you figure out what bus is going out when, and make sure that it's charged properly, and you don't overcharge and use too much power here and there, and check with the rates. So ChargePoint sounds like ChargePoint is your partner on that. And
ChargePoint's the software
available
partner.
to the industry, which would be great, for the rest of us to be able to tap into that wonderful automotive software. And last but not least, you've got this clever device, which is
Isn't that
checking out
clever?
what's going on in the field. So I'm very impressed. You've got 4 areas of activity going on, so that's really, really exciting. So well, why don't we go on to the next pioneer, which is Mark here at AVTA and his team.
So hello, I'm Mark Perry for Antelope Valley Transit Authority. I'm the Director of Operations and Maintenance there. About 2012, we were directed to consider moving our entire bus fleet to full electric to stay in conjunction with what our cities around us were doing. They're trying to be, the city of Lancaster is trying to be self-sufficient off the grid by 2020, I believe. So since they're part of our JPA, it was handed down to us to consider going full electric. All the benefits that everybody's discussed on the panel would apply to that as well. So we currently operate a fleet of about 75 buses, 30 commuter coaches, and 45 transit buses. So as being a diesel guy and a gearhead myself, I cringed at the idea of needing to do this. But what I'll tell you guys is, as you approach this, for every challenge, you're going to find a solution that's going to benefit you as you go down the road. You can turn this and make it favorable for you. So our story starts in 2014 when we received our first 2 electric buses. We had no idea what data we were going to collect. We really didn't have any experience in this field. We started looking at kilowatts per mile because it was a good comparison to our diesel buses for mileage, gallons to the mile. That's a big joke at our place for our diesel buses. Anyway, we started trying to compare it, gather as much data as we possibly could. We realized right away, the first thing we realized was the operator has a big, big effect in your range, which affects your energy costs. So as we started planning this out to go from our 2-bus pilot immediately into a full fleet flip, we started analyzing all this stuff and planning what our depot charging would look like. We already knew how long our routes were. We wanted to transition one diesel bus to one electric bus. To make sure that we could afford this, we wanted to stay. We're a smaller fleet. We're under 100 buses. We wanted to stay under 100 buses. So the need to transfer one bus for one bus was very evident to us in the very beginning. So one of our challenges was going to be we only have about a 6-hour window for each mode of transit. The commuter coaches, they're in the yard for about 5 or 6 hours. Transit buses the same way. And the way they trickle into the yard in the evenings on roll-in is a challenge as well, because now you got to go plug all the buses in. So the initial data that we got to build our depot station was going to be 18,000 amps of energy. When we first met with Southern California Edison, and I have to admit they were great, great partners for us. We looked at this and they looked at their grid in a meeting we had, and they said you could only get 10,000 amps delivered to your facility without building a substation. Substation would take 5 to 7 years to build. up to about $10 to $13 million. That's just not something we had. So we started looking at, okay, as we plug these buses in, what is our peak going to be, and how can we control it? We knew that the multiplexing system was controlling the contactors in the bus, and we took some of the knowledge we knew. We started asking some questions, and we discovered that we could actually turn the contactors on and off in the bus, and we could regulate when the bus received a charge. So we started looking at energy, time of use rates and things like that, and then the EV rates came into play. So we put all that together. We went from 18,000 amps of energy peak to, we were at about 7,800 amps when we looked at how we naturally do business in our yard anyway. So now we're under the 10,000 amps. Edison allowed us to build our depot charging station. But when we did this, we graphed out how these buses roll in, and we realized that if we could delay some of the charges and move them around a little bit, we could take that peak of 7,800 amps and drop it down to under 5,000 amps. There's even some speculations that we can get down under 3,000 amps of draw. What that relates to in kilowatts, these guys are smarter than I am to figure out the math, but what I see is it's going to lower our energy costs drastically. At that point, we'll be able to still have all the buses 100% charged by morning. We'll be able to manage when they charge and how they charge, and obviously be able to operate our buses and afford to pay our electric bill. Judy will probably choke me if I get it any higher than it is now. So like I say, we're a small agency, so we watch our budget closely. So that's what we've been able to do with controlling our costs for our depot charging station. Now we also need inductive charging for opportunity charging throughout the day. When we put all that together, we knew we needed as much power as we could because our routes are very long. We're a very rural area, and we have one particular route that is about 560 miles in a single day, including deadhead time and all that. So there's another challenge. So we looked at the charging situation for out in the field, and we decided, okay, knowing what we know now about the depot charging, let's put these inductive chargers in at locations spread out throughout the Antelope Valley, and we can opportunity charge here and there. We have several sites, so the peak at each site will be relatively low, get the buses in one after the other instead of on top of each other and charging at the same time. We can also lower the peak demand there. So there's a lot of ways you can control this and manipulate it, but you have to be able to control it. So we elected to use HAMS. IO Controls has the HAMS system. They also developed the ELM system. We were kind of part of that. Called Wai-Ping up one day and asked him, can you turn that contactor on and off? Yeah. Okay, so here's what we want to do. And it's escalated. We can control the head sign now while it's charging, notify people that people walking around the yard at night, hey, the bus isn't charging. We have monitors in the dispatch area. Well, it's not in the dispatch area yet, but it's about to be. But the maintenance shop right across from the maintenance counter, we have a display. If there's a bus not charging, the display turns the bus red. Somebody gets out there and finds out why that charger's not working, because our biggest fear is, after I get done with Judy here and being able to pay the bill, is not being able to run service by morning, and I need the bus to be 100% charged by morning. So that's how we're controlling and managing our energy costs. The next step for us is one of the most inefficient parts of running an electric bus is operator performance. It's not that they want to do a bad job, they're just used to driving buses very aggressively because they're trying to stay on time. I've ridden with a few of our operators. I've raced most of my life. I know what a pit stop's like, and they scared me to death pulling into a bus stop. So getting your operators to relax a little bit, to pace themselves, coast up to the bus stop is a big, big plus, and you'd be surprised how much you can gain. We had, when we first started running our buses, we had, in the same day, on the same route, opposite directions, we had one operator perform at 1.54 kilowatts per mile, which is actually the record for one of our 44 buses in one day. The same route, same time of the day, opposite direction. should be about the same number, over 4 kilowatts per mile. We worked with that operator. She's, the last I looked at up her data, she's consistently in the average range now. So we're trying to get that a little closer together. So the next step for us in controlling the costs is going to be, these folks are putting together, Hitesh and Brett are putting together a driver performance app where we can actually rate the operators. So we're going to look at the operators and give them a scoring, give them a score. We're going to reward the top of the list as an incentive program because competition will build, will make this better, I believe. And then the bottom of the scale, we don't want anybody to be offended, so we're not going to put their name on any plaques or put their picture on the wall. We're going to go work with them and try to make them better operators. So close that gap a little bit because you're going to find that it's a big gap in the very beginning, very big. So that's one way. And our next phase, once we get our bus flip completed, we've actually already started looking into this. Our next phase will be we have some property around us. We have the luxury in the desert. There's a lot of open desert out there. To purchase some property around us, we want to build a park and ride that will be covered with solar. We have an area picked out in our yard. We're going to put some battery storage. Our goal is to run our commuter service out of this park and ride, for say. Covered, it's a desert. Nobody likes to park out in the sun, so they'll be in the shade. And they can get our commuter service through there and ride it down to the Los Angeles area or Edwards Air Force Base, where we're going now. And it'll turn more into a park and ride, but we can use the solar to charge these batteries during the day. And my goal is to get our propulsion costs net zero. And between that and LCFS credits, where's my boss? I need a raise. I know. Our hope is that we can utilize the environment and all the things around us to get to net zero and run our bus service propulsion free, transfer one bus for one bus, and make this entire thing green as possible. These folks are going to explain to you more about how we plan on working with the operators, and they're going to try to tell you that you could sell some of this energy during the day. I don't recommend it.
Before we go on there, let me just recap here. I think it's important to note, we're getting a pretty complete story from this group. It's pretty interesting that you've got to plan, because when they went to the utility and said they were going to build a 100% zero-emission fleet, they said they're going to have to bring in a whole other infrastructure to do that. That was way out in another world, some space, to get to 10,000 or even 18,000 amps where they started. And they went and got smarter and smarter, got it down to 10 to 5,000 amps by being smart. And you think you got to go through the process of planning first. So we've heard that a lot from earlier today. Get out there and plan way out in front before you're ready to buy, okay? If you can do that, you're going to be better off in that space. So using the ham system, we're going to hear more about it, I presume, and smarts to overlay and just have smart charging systems. But the driver training was really interesting. I think that, I've heard that driver training could impact performance as much as 20%. So that's a pretty big impact. If everybody has a heavy foot, that does another 20% impact on your electricity costs. So lots of great learnings here. Let's go on now to, is it going to be Brett next?
Me?
Mike, you're next. Mike?
Oh, Hitesh, sorry.
Hitesh, sorry.
Hi, everybody. Hitesh from Olivine. We are a company that does distributed energy analysis, and we basically try to bring distributed energy resources into California's electricity markets. So we came into a project with AVTA that was funded by the California Energy Commission, and it was really focused around vehicle-to-grid integration. Vehicles that plug in, the grid over here, get them together, happy marriage, right? Our first meeting with Mark, he says, "You're not touching my batteries." And we have great jokes about it since then. So early on, we started by basically building a fleet simulator. So we put in exactly your fleet makeup, what type of buses you've got, what routes they're running, basically GPS locations, schedule, and then we can play with where you want to put charging locations. And we modeled AVTA, so we had depot charging, different types of chargers. We basically build a bus pool and a charger pool, and we run this simulator as if though you're running your fleet. And then what we do at the end is we have fake meters in the simulator, and we tell you what your electricity load profile is going to look like. And what this allowed us to do was start to play through charging scenarios. And I think a lot of my learnings from this, our learnings from this, will sort of build upon what you've heard these fine gentlemen just tell you. So case by case, so another thing we did in this project was we had to do a sensitivity analysis and start looking at some other districts and scenarios and see what things look like. And I have to tell you, what your load is going to look like and what your charges are going to look like are going to vary significantly between all of you. And the reason is because you have very different duty cycles and you have very different routes. And time of use rates, which means you pay different amounts per kilowatt hour at different times of day, means that there's no clear answer for everybody. And so I highly encourage you to get somebody like us or somebody else who can do this energy analysis for you early on so you can start exploring, well, where should I put these chargers? Do I have a little bit of route flexibility? I know that's really hard, but do I have some route flexibility? And then you can start brainstorming all sorts of different things. What are some of the things you can consider? So if you're in PG&E territory, other things aside, they are proposing a new commercial EV rate, which is, from our initial analysis comparing between old rates and new rates and also comparing with SCE rates, it's very favorable. And one of the big changes is they have this concept of a subscription. So they've gone away with the demand charge and have introduced this notion of subscription, which is like a cell phone plan. As long as you stay within the subscription that you commit to a year ahead of time, you're great. If you go over, you start paying overages, and overages do look a little bit more like a demand charge. And some people have said, oh, the subscription looks like a demand charge too, but to be honest, it's way more favorable than a demand charge, just in terms of the amount of money out of your pocket. So I highly encourage you to start looking at what does that commercial rate look like for you. This is a PG&E commercial EV rate. And we might see that the other IOUs start to replicate that if it becomes a really attractive, workable option. To the SCE case with the demand charge holiday, I think that's a great idea, but most of these fleets are not going to get fully built out for 5 years, so that you're not going to be able to really take a big advantage of that holiday. And I think you're going to get that once that demand charge kicks back in, you've got a lot of complexity there, because now you need to every year change your charging pattern because the economics turns out to be different between this slowly ramping up demand charge. So it can be a really complicated picture, and I'm hoping that this PG&E subscription thing might catch on with other IOUs. Three more points. I'll make it super quick, I promise. Another thing you can think about is if part of your fleet is a commuter fleet, think of running it 180 degrees out of phase. And what I mean by that is if you're more in a rural location and you're running into the city, put your charging depot in the city. And I know that's going to be expensive, but maybe you can share that with that local transit district that's in the city. And the reason is because then you can take advantage of those really low rates in the mornings. And that's going to continue as we get more renewables online. We're going to have better and better rates in that morning to early afternoon. And then you drive back out to the suburban location and you don't charge. You run back into the city, you fully charge during the day, and you repeat it. So think about it 180 degrees out of phase. If you want to do PV and battery, it all comes down who's going to pay for your PV and battery. If you can get grant money, it works out, but if not, the finances might not actually look as good as just buying your electricity from the grid. And then back to VGI. I know no one wants to do it because it puts your bus operations at risk, and I totally get it, but maybe 5, maybe 10 years from now, once we've learned a lot about how to run EV buses, we come back to VGI and make it work. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah, so great non-link simulation software, Olivine. That sounds like that's your trademark there. So why don't we go on to Brett?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Brett Webster. I work for a company called Energy Solutions, which is a mission-driven consulting firm based in Oakland, California. And I think I'm the only one that disregarded the instructions of the panel and actually put together a couple of slides. So sorry about that, Fred. Anyways, we have been working with AVTA on this piece that Mark mentioned around designing and implementing a training and incentive program for the operators at AVTA, with the goal being to further drive down electricity and other operating costs through a sort of smart driving approach. So like Hitesh mentioned, our work is funded through a California Energy Commission EPIC program grant and Zero Net Energy Alliance is the prime on the grant. So we've been working for a little over a year to get a platform and database together that allows us to track and analyze operator performance. And the goal for us has really been to try to understand the impact on efficiency of those behaviors that are within the operator's control. So things like acceleration, coasting, and braking. At AVTA, the heating and cooling operation and set points are not within the operator's control. They're set at the shop. And so we're really just focused on this sort of speed profile that the operator takes through a route. So what it comes down to, as this graph is showing, is really asking operators to, and incentivizing them to optimize their speed profile. This graph is entirely illustrative. This is not based on real numbers, but I just want to use it to, I think, show that this is not necessarily going to be the holy grail of fleet conversion, but that there are some gains to be made through operator behavior. So on the x-axis here is time, and on the y-axis is speed. The gray bar is a hypothetical baseline speed profile, and the green bar is a totally hypothetical optimized speed profile, right? And the point here is just to show that, so at each interval where their speed goes to 0, we could imagine as a scheduled bus stop along its route, right? And so the point here is to show that if we tell operators to do something like make your deceleration more gradual or accelerate gradually, in order for them to stay on schedule, we also need to tell them you need to reach a higher top speed, right, to be able to get to their next stop on time. And so I think that doing that kind of messaging with operators is going to be subject to real world constraints around speed limits and traffic conditions and all those other things. And so the room for efficiency improvement is actually likely to be relatively small. There are studies out there that show in simulation improvement of 10 to 30%. And so that's the neighborhood with which we're shooting, which I think in aggregate could actually have a pretty impactful, make a pretty impactful difference on fleet operations. But anyways, just wanted to show that. The strategies for our program that are going to be prioritized for training, the first and second are tied in the fact that they are focused on the operator's use of the battery regeneration system on these buses. So coasting and a gradual deceleration rate. We have found this to be the most important factor within the driver's control affecting vehicle efficiency. And it was sort of a nice corroboration for us between a literature review, our own theoretical calculations, and the observed data we've collected on operators, that we found a very statistically significant relationship between drivers' deceleration rate and vehicle efficiency, and not a significant relationship between their acceleration rate and vehicle efficiency. So what it really comes down to is this slow deceleration rate into stops to be able to maximize the regeneration. If a driver steps on the brakes too aggressively, they could either max out the capacity of the regen system or engage the air brakes, in which case a lot of energy that could have been recovered is lost to friction and heat. So those are the two main strategies. And then this third one around preheating and cooling is not totally within the operator's control, but is a good thing for them to be able to roll into their checks while they're in the yard. Because if the bus, especially on a hot or cold day, if the bus is able to reach its set point while it's still plugged in, then it will avoid that big drain on the battery in the warm-up or cool-down period after it leaves the yard. This is just an overview of the efficiency program. So we're combining three elements. The first is a training, like I mentioned, and through the Energy Commission grant, we're partnered with the company TAPCO, which already does a lot of bus operator training programs. And the goal with the training is to combine classroom and on-road techniques and to create some messaging around the balancing between safety and on-time performance and efficiency, right? Because you could imagine that those may come into conflict if we're telling operators to adjust their speed profiles. After the training is rolled out, there'll be a feedback for operators on a daily basis, and our plan is to send operators daily emails that communicate their performance. And the crucial aspect of this is that it will be a normalized performance metric so that we're controlling for those factors not within the operator's control. Things like outdoor temperature, the route that they're on, the bus type that they're driving, the time of day that they're driving, if they're driving during rush hour or not, so that we can have some way to meaningfully compare drivers across each other and across time periods. And then to offer incentives for top performers. And these could be individual-based, as is going to be the case in our program. But these could also take the form of organizing operators into teams where then they are able to communicate and share best practices around efficient behaviors. So that whole package we will be rolling out in April, and then a third-party M&V firm will be evaluating the impact and cost effectiveness of this program over the next year, and will come out as sort of a final report through this grant project that we've been working on.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Well, that's very good. I mean, certainly this driver training software is something really we should be looking at, and it made me think that maybe we should have somebody sponsor an efficiency test at one of the bus rodeos at APTA or at the one here in California coming up to see who the most efficient electric drivers are. And it also tells me, in listening to this whole group, I think you've all deployed consultants. Mark Perry has really deployed a whole team of consultants here to see him succeed. So that's another part of our learning here today is you probably need smart people to do smart stuff. Yeah. So that's something to consider. I would like to get some feedback from the audience on those that are doing stuff that we haven't talked about here. The one thing that did come up was energy storage. And Donna, I hate to pick on you, but would you mind just tell us a little bit about what you might be doing in terms of energy storage project at your location and how that might impact the saving some money on electricity and stuff?
So first of all, Fred, I don't believe that you hate to pick on me, I think. You've been waiting for this. We are just looking into it. We are part of PG&E's Fleet Ready program, and that program will include both developing overnight chargers at our main operating facility and then doing some battery storage at one of our charging sites off-site. So we have 2 overhead chargers there, and we're hoping that by doing energy storage, we're going to be able to peak shave and get some of those demand costs down, because we are paying a lot in demand cost. As a matter of fact, our energy costs have really been quite concerning for us because, you know, as you said, Roland, we're small agencies. We're always trying to figure out how to save money. Really, our commitment is to put service on the street, so we've been very, very concerned about the demand cost and the high charges. Currently, we're spending about 3 times as much per mile to operate electric vehicles as our hybrid vehicles, and that's a tough story to sell. We're very committed. We have 17, but we're very optimistic that when we get into this energy and battery storage project, that will help us a lot. And we're excited about the subscription rate that we're hearing about, too. So
Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Storage could be a solution as well, to mitigate your demand charges. That's one thing we didn't hear a lot about on the panel here today. Are there other fleets in the audience that have some experience or planning some technologies that Royland? You want to add some stuff?
So for us at Foothill Transit, we hired a consultant again. It's a group of engineers, professionals, and planners and whatnot. And part of their study is looking at renewable source of energy to help us mitigate our utility cost. Initial results of their analysis shows that we would probably need about 8 megawatts of solar panel to power our fleet. The size of our facility only limits us to about 2 megawatts. So another approach would be, in addition to installing solar panels over our charging stations, is to try to buy energy, off-site solar energy, and then couple that with battery energy storage. But then again, you got to look at all the equipment that you're putting into your yard, especially with space constraints. You're putting in all this new equipment to be able to charge your buses and adding in another battery storage and possibly installing a gas-powered generator for emergency purposes. So there's a lot of things that you really need to look into, and how do you evaluate all of that in terms of your needs. But again, solar panels, off-site solar, purchasing energy through off-site solar providers, as well as battery storage.
If I may just add a real quick comment, I think if you are going to deploy storage, you'll get much better bang for your buck from that storage dollar at opportunity charging than you would at the depot. And this just has to do with the way the load shape looks like at opportunity charges versus the depot.
I don't want to prevent anybody from asking questions. I have questions I could go on with, but are there any questions for the audience or additional contributions? Yes?
Hi, Jimmy O'Day, Union of Concerned Scientists, great panel. Brett, question on, could you explain why deceleration was the bigger factor in improving efficiency?
Well, so I think a few reasons. One, well, mostly to do with that's the part where the biggest losses are occurring in the regen system. So the driver is able, the more energy a driver can recover through the regen system, the better the efficiency is going to look over the course of a trip. The acceleration rate, the efficiency curve for an electric motor is relatively tight. The increase in losses you might see from a rapid acceleration event can be minimized through the size of the wires, so they're probably not that great. And likewise, I think, or what we've observed through the data, is that any effect on the battery capacity through rapid deceleration or rapid acceleration events is minimized through the design of the system, really. Yeah.
Clarifying question for Mark. On the 500-mile route range you have, that could be served with one bus with en-route charging?
Yes, we'll have inductive chargers throughout that route. There are time points already scheduled into those routes. So every 10 minutes, the 250 kilowatt chargers that we're using will add. On a 40-foot bus, it's about 16 to 18 miles. On a 60-foot bus, it'll be 18 to 20 miles, depending on the operator's efficiency. But if we scatter those inductive chargers out, we can pick up some more energy and put some back throughout the course of the day and just kind of keep the packs charged up.
And is this already happening, or is it planned?
It's in process now. We have 6 installed. We have 6 more to go.
Thanks.
Okay, any other? We have a question here.
Question for Brett again on the, I'm sorry, on measuring efficiency. Is that data available to the operator real time? In other words, if I'm driving my car, most new cars will tell you your real-time mileage. Can the operator see that?
Yeah, so Mark can answer this question better than I can.
I'd rather not.
I think that is true on every
The
bus.
operators have enough to do. That's why we're planning on having a display for the operators to see, and they can check it. We've discussed an email process where they could get emailed every day, see what their performance was that particular day, and they can self-monitor themselves. Since it is an incentive program, they end up policing themselves. Like I say, the competition, I think, will drive their performance levels way up.
The other, I guess the follow-up for Brett is, have you looked at rolling out that program for other bus types to improve mileage? There's driver behavior, I would think, would improve mileage on a hybrid CNG. Is that something you're doing?
So we've thus far only been working with AVTA with the battery electric buses, but right, a very similar program could be applicable to different bus types for sure.
I think didn't we have a question up here first? Sierra Club fellow? I forget his name.
Thank you. Ray Pingle, Sierra Club. So this is obviously a very complex area, and we've got a great panel that have raised huge points. But the way I like to think about this is we want to bake a cake, and the goal of the cake is to taste really good, and the lower the cost of the cake, the better it's going to taste. And so what are the ingredients that are going to go in to make this cake? So one is to manage the demand charges. And so there's a couple ways to do that. One is if you can, do only depot charging. Try not to do very fast DC charging. And most transit agencies buying electric buses today, I think, are trying to go with a depot charging extended bus range. The second is if you can get a favorable tariff, and I'm with Hitosh, I think the subscription model is going to become prevalent, and it'll work for buses and trucks and everything. So if you get a subscription price, then you don't have to worry about it. The second ingredient is a smart charging system. So that's going to be the system with the physical chargers connected to a computer. And then you also have to have a real-time system in the buses. The two have to connect together. And that system will do a couple things. It'll minimize the cost of electricity from the rate by managing time of use. And the second thing it will do, if you do have demand charges, is reduce the demand charges. The third ingredient is solar, and some people may not have property to install solar, but as much as you can, in most cases, I think, the more solar you can install on your own property, the better. And this will obviously lower the cost of the electricity, if it makes sense after an analysis. And also, it will increase your LCFS credits by a third. A lot of people don't understand that. It's a really good point. The next thing is evaluate storage, and as Hitosh said, it may or may not make sense, but at least it's something to evaluate. And the next ingredient is the LCF credits. So these credits are very large, and when you look at your total cost of electricity for a typical 40-foot bus going 40,000 miles a year, you can save $9,000 to $10,000 a year just from the LCSF. And then if you have solar, that can be $12,000 or $13,000 a year. And then last is all the very complex, sophisticated things that Gary has done with VTA and with ChargePoint, where you start even getting more sophisticated on how you integrate other systems and optimize them and model them out. But you're not going to do that day one, you know. So I think if starting with these basic ingredients and then learning and evolving is going to get the best tasting cake.
That was an outstanding summary. Thank you for doing that for me. Just one clarification, I think that Roland.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, in the beginning of your statement, you said that to avoid high demand charges, to have in-depot charge the buses instead of en-route. I just want to clarify that because demand charge is related to the amount of energy you're drawing to charge your buses, whether it's en-route or in-depot. In fact, I even see in-depot as creating more of a higher demand charge for you versus en-route. If you have less buses you're charging en route, your demand charge is going to be small. But if you're charging, let's say you have a fleet of 200 buses and you charge them all at the same time, you're drawing 150 kilowatts per bus. Your peak demand is going to go up drastically, so that en depot, in result, your charge for demand charge is going to be really high. So it depends on how you charge your buses. It doesn't have to be. I don't think just because you're charging your buses in depot, your demand charges are going to be lower. It's based on how much energy you're drawing to power up your charges. So whether en route or in depot, depends on how much energy you're drawing. So
yeah, so it sounds like it could be one way or the other, and it sounds like the scenario analysis that Olivine provides is the answer to this problem. So at this point, I know I want to keep on time and respect the symposium. I think we're. Okay, I think we had something from Len back there.
Yeah, just a reminder to the guys, that training program, part of the grant is to make that training program available at no cost to transit agencies in California.
Oh, that's great. Great. Okay, we'll make sure that becomes available. Well, I want to thank the wonderful panel and all this great information, and recognize all the wonderful consultants in the audience.
We're going to take a short break, and the next panel is going to start at 2:45 sharp.